Hey everyone, today we have a special guest on the show, and her name is Rhonda Roederer, and she's with Heritage with a Heart. Rhonda is a fairly new resident to our area and is a genealogy expert. And she's in my weekly leads group meeting with the chamber, and we talked to her a little bit about what she does recently. And I thought it might make a really interesting show, listening to a couple of her stories. So, Rhonda, thank you so much for being on the show. And I guess to kind of kick things off, tell us how you kind of got started and tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got started.
Okay, well, thank you for having me, Mike. It's a pleasure. So, how did I get started in genealogy? It's kind of a little bit of a long story, but I'm going to try to keep it as succinct as possible. One, I made a very big mistake, and it's a mistake that I think other people can relate to. I waited till it was too late. So, my mom had died when I was 19 and my dad when I was 22. And so I knew nothing about my family. And so when I started kind of looking back and trying to think, it's like I didn't even know three of my four grandparents. They had all passed away before I was born. And so I reached out and I started asking questions to an aunt. And I just said, I don't even know the name of my great grandfather. The Roederer name always interested me because it was so rare. We were always on family vacations. First thing you do when you get to the hotel is look in the phone book and see if you can find anybody with your last name. We never did. So I just kind of felt like I was the only, one of maybe 10 Roederers on the planet, it seemed. So when I found out the name, I decided to take a trip. So I was kind of going through the grieving process and so forth, and I just wanted to get out. So I went up to Louisville, Kentucky to search out the grave of my great grandfather. Everything seemed to change at that point. So I go to the cemetery and I ask, it's a very large cemetery, Cave Hill Cemetery in Louisville. And I said, I'm looking for Christian Roederer's grave. And they looked through and they said, well, which one? And I'm like, whoa, wait, what's going on here? There can only be one. This name is so rare. He said, no, we've got three here. And I said, well, how many Roederers do you have buried here? He looked at his list and said, looks like 80, 100. Wow. I was blown away, absolutely blown away. So it turns out when I'm going through trying to find this one grave, I'm constantly seeing other Roederer graves. And it just hit me. It's like, I've got to know how every one of these is related to me. Kind of a strange goal, but it took me 5 years to do it, but I did. Wow. And along that, now keep in mind, this is before internet, before cell phones. I'm reaching out to family members, cold calls, knocking on doors, that sort of thing. And the thing that really got me is how many of these people actually let me in their lives, opened up their door to a complete stranger just because we had a name in common. And so that ended up resulting into friendships that I've had for 35 years. It led to me finding the ancestral village where the Roederers came from. So it took me to 2 trips to Germany. Oh, wow. One was actually on my honeymoon. We did a genealogy honeymoon for both me and my husband, going to Hungary for his family and Germany for mine.
That's cool.
And it also resulted in just visits all over the country with cousins that we met for the very first time. And that was what really made this turn into from a hobby to a passion with me. And it's kind of like once you start getting into it, kind of like the show Outlander, where you time travel, you really learn and kind of get to know your ancestors. And it has led me to people and places that I never dreamed imaginable.
That's so cool. So what kind of projects have you done for people?
It varies. Lots and lots of interesting projects. One, helping people organize their own genealogy, where they ended up getting a genealogy inheritance. Okay. And what I mean by genealogy inheritance, how many of you have just a big box of pictures, nameless faces? It's organizing that. I've helped that for a lot of people. I have done histories on people's homes and property. I have brought light to mystery photos. Help
Okay.
people identify these nameless faces. It's not as hard as you might imagine. And also just solving family mysteries, finding schoolmates, old boyfriends, old girlfriends. That's always been kind of interesting there. Just a little bit of everything, anything that somebody has, just helping to make family connections. Sometimes people get estranged from family members for one reason or another. Well, I've seen some of those connections happen. So I've always thought, people say that you can't pick your family. I say you can, because that's what I've done.
That's really funny.
So yeah, I end up being closer to some of my fourth and fifth cousins than people that are much closer related. And it's all through this genealogy research.
That's so cool. And again, I never even, you see stuff like on television, like, for like ancestry.com and things like that. And sometimes I would think, like, all right, well, I mean, I know most of the people in my family, but I kind of wonder, sometimes when you really dig in, maybe there'd be some surprises or stuff. What's one of the most impactful projects you've done?
Well, actually, I'd say the most impactful is the one that made me decide to change my career. My
Okay.
40-year career in the oil industry, I decided I want to do genealogy for the rest of my life,
Okay.
and to help others. So it all kind of started about really almost 7 years ago. I happened to get this email through Ancestry that there was a DNA match that I had. And we only shared like 35 centimorgans, which is not very much. Centimorgans just being a unit of measure of a family linkage. And he was an adoptee. He says, I'm adopted. I have no information. It says we're connected. I've reached out to several other people and nobody has gotten back with me. And he says, I'm not wanting a kumbaya or anything like that. He goes, I just want to know the truth. And I'm hoping that you can help me. So when I saw it in just the way that he wrote this, it just spoke to me. It was almost like I felt like I knew this guy, but I didn't. And so I wrote back and I said, I'd be happy to help you. Obviously we are related through the Roederer line. And I've been accumulating this database, and I have over 21,000 relatives on the Roederer side here that I've been researching. I said, this is going to be.
You thought there were only 10 of you.
Right, exactly. So I said, this is going to be a piece of cake, no problem. Well, it turns out that I ended up making another big mistake. I discounted one of the possibilities of his birth family, all because I actually had met his grandfather 23 years prior.
Interesting.
So it took us about 5 months to solve this mystery. All the pieces started coming together. He and I were just working on it constantly. We had hundreds of phone calls and emails and text messages and all of this. During this, I'm kind of glad that I did make this mistake, because he and I wouldn't have bonded like we had. I would have just found it and said, hey, here's the information, good luck with it. But instead, just because I hadn't found, we were both very determined. And when he would get a little tired of it, I was hot on the trail. And then when I had life happen or whatever, and I kind of put it aside, he was on it. So one of us was always on this constantly. And when the case finally broke open, well, we had actually, before that, we had realized there were so many things that he and I had in common. We shared the same birthday.
Okay.
We were in the same oil profession. I was on the exploration side. He was on the production side.
Wow.
Both of us had second marriages. Neither one of us had children. We were both left-handed. I mean, just all of these crazy coincidences. And when he and I were just kind of bonding, all of a sudden he said, you know what, even if I don't find my birth family, he says, I kind of met a cool cousin. And so we decided, I said, well, I think the same thing. I said, let's plan on meeting. He lived in Texas. At the time I was in New Orleans. And so we met in Lafayette, my old hometown. And the moment that we met, the four of us, his wife and my husband, the four of us together, it was just instant chemistry. And since then, in those 6 years, we have actually gotten together 8 times.
That's cool.
And that's being hundreds of miles apart. We either text or call or FaceTime or something at least once a week. And this has been going on for 6 years. And so speaking of when people look at their DNA, if they have taken a DNA test, especially say with Ancestry, and you see this huge list of third and fourth cousins, and you're thinking, what can those people do for me?
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you what they can do for you. They can change your life.
That's cool.
Truly.
That's awesome.
Truly.
So you weren't able to figure out things from there, or were
Yes, we did figure it out. And he ended up meeting most of his family members, close family members. And from that point, I decided, since this guy knew nothing, knew no family members now except me,
right.
I decided to have a family reunion.
Oh, wow.
So I did a family reunion in Louisville, Kentucky, and we had over 210 people show up from 23 to 24 different states, and 10 actually came from Germany as
cool.
well.
Wow, that's really neat.
And so I made it a big surprise for everybody that was there at the reunion as well, to introduce them to the brand new cousin, and they just embraced him 100%. And he's still in contact with many of those distant cousins of his.
That's so cool. So what was maybe, so I think that was impactful. What was maybe one of the most surprising project results you had?
There's been a lot of surprises, both with clients that I've had as well as myself. I'm going to tell you two real surprising ones. One with a client of mine. She was searching out the truth of the murder of her great-grandfather.
Oh, wow.
And I've actually done 2 projects where there have been mysterious death for clients. And this particular one, it was about that the man had gotten shot by the cops. And the family was saying, oh, of course, it was a big mistake. He was wrong place, wrong time. Well, going through old newspapers and pulling together a lot of evidence there, he was not a good guy. And we found some kind of fun stories out of it.
Okay.
And so it wasn't like devastating for her. It was just like, hey, this is family. You take the good, the bad, the ugly, and we just embrace that and take that information from there. And so she just was so happy to be able to know the truth, and same thing, pass it on to the other family members of what the story really was. And the one that really surprises for me personally was the fact that right after my father passed away, and I'm going through a lot of his effects, I stumble across his World War II papers, and saw that when he went into the service, this was back in 41, before we even were at war, he went in single, and then his discharge papers, he was married. This was 2 years before he ever met my mom.
Oh.
And it was a shock,
Wow.
Absolute shock, because no word had ever been mentioned of this to anyone in the family. And here I am, I'm 22 years old. It's like, come on, I'm an adult, it's not like this has to be a big secret. And so I started just wondering, all these questions started going through my head. Do I have a sibling? Is she still alive? Did my mother even know? And so I searched out, and it haunted me, truly haunted me for years. It took me 27 years to find out the truth.
Oh, wow.
And I have this story in one of my family history detective episodes that I do. And so it's probably one that I do the most on that. And then it ends up, it's something that everybody can relate to. Everyone's got family secrets. And now with DNA, with the internet and everything, a lot of those secrets that have been taken to the grave are now surfacing. And you got to know how to deal with them. And so it ended up giving me a really interesting perspective on my own life.
Okay.
Because I found out that this woman that I knew nothing about, ended up having a profound effect on me once I found out what the true answers were. And again, it took me 27 years to find it. So to say I'm determined, just
you really dig in.
just a little bit, but it's one of those things with when you're doing detective work, you've got to keep at it if you want to be successful at it. And more things keep coming out with the internet. And of course, when I started that quest of trying to find out who this woman was, it was before the internet.
Yeah.
Or before the internet was introduced to me, I'd say. And so I had to just keep checking back and getting new ideas, being very creative is kind of a key thing on successful research of how to get it. And in that episode that I give, it's very unlikely source actually led me to the truth. And it was truth that were not in any documents that could be found.
Wow.
It was by tracking down the people that actually had the answers.
Now, how can now you say your episodes? Do you have a podcast, or you have a story, like a place where the stories are on your website or anything?
Yes, the actual titles of the talks that I have available are on my website, Heritage with Heart. And right now, currently, I have 19 available, and these are great for conferences, workshops, society meetings. I've given a lot of these talks for libraries and historical and genealogical societies. And they cover a wide variety of subjects. So I have a story on my Civil War ancestor, tracking down some of that and honoring him 107 years later. That's kind of a fun one as well. I've got another one on a distant cousin that I actually found that started, he was born in Diersburg, Germany, where my family originated. And he grew up a Nazi youth and immigrated here and ended up living the American dream. And so that's a really, really interesting story. So you can just check out any of the subjects that I've got on the website, and just send me an email through there. And we can also do master classes. I've done a lot of that for continuing education for seniors or for genealogy societies as well.
Interesting. And I will make sure I post a link to your website in the show notes if anybody wants to check that out. I hope they do. That'll be there as well.
Thank you.
Has there ever been anybody that found out somebody in their life was like someone? It could be good or bad, I guess, but like, try and find going back and looking at their like past relatives and that sort of thing, their family tree, where they find out they're related to like royalty or something like that. Does that seem to happen, or is it more often that they find out something maybe they didn't want to know?
It's really a mixed bag. I've done a lot of research on families that say they have a Native American heritage. And that is very rare that I have found on there. So a lot of them are family tales. And that's one of the things that I also do for clients is these family tales. I find out whether there's some truth to them. Sometimes there is a bit of truth to it. And so kind of like for my own personal things, I had always heard that we were related to Daniel Boone. So when I finally started researching, well, sort of related to Daniel Boone, his grandfather is my seventh great grandfather.
Okay.
So here it's like, yeah, kind of distantly related, but not, the way the story was, oh, he was our
Like a
ancestor.
direct descendant.
Exactly. So you hear a lot of things like that, and people, oh, I want to see that because my name is Lewis, I want to see that I am connected to this famous Lewis person. I want to, so that's a little bit more difficult in there. I find people get rewarded mostly by being able to learn the story of their ancestor, not just let it be a name and a date. Because on a tombstone where you have the birth date and then you have the death date and you have a dash in between. Well, I like filling in that dash. That dash is where these people come to life.
Yeah. And that's really what it's all about. I mean, storytelling in general, I think, is that's kind of how we learn. It's how we kind of absorb things, is figuring out, that timeline and this, the story. And so by you being able to put that all together, I think it probably helps a lot of people, and that's pretty cool. How'd you end up in the Hickory area, by the way?
Well, mainly just I love the weather.
Okay.
here not lately. Just it's quite different from Louisiana, and that's where I was born and raised. Was Louisiana. Never lived anywhere else. And my husband and I ended up taking a lot of vacations up here in the mountains. We love hiking and biking and that sort of thing. And when I got the opportunity to retire from the oil industry, we decided, let's just make a big change and let's come on up and live here up in the mountains. And things that we used to do on vacation, we now get to do 15, 20, 30 minutes away from the house and go hiking and go to a waterfall and that sort of thing. And I always thought that people in Louisiana were really friendly, and people from this area, they are the friendliest people I have ever had the pleasure of meeting. And
that's cool. That's true. I'm not originally from here. I mean, I always like to ask people, like, how they ended up in Hickory, or just in this area in general. And there's a lot of people that are from here, but there's a lot of people that have moved here over the years. And I think everybody's really welcoming of everybody here. And I've been able to build my business here and my livelihood here, so I'll always be grateful to that. But there is something special about, I feel like, where we are geographically. You can just do so many things, again, like, we're not that far, from the mountains, there's parks that are really close by. I mean, there's just so many things to do. And it's just a really beautiful place. I mean, when it all really comes down to it, and there, something to just be said for that. But I like to think it's best of both worlds. I definitely miss my family. Most of my family still lives in New Jersey, so I definitely miss kind of being around them as often. But when it comes to having to live my life, I'm really happy I get to live it here, though. So it's kind of a tough balance, but definitely love it.
Totally relate. In fact, when we were first trying to find where exactly in the mountains that we wanted to live, we would go into shops and we would actually interview people, and we'd ask either if they had always been there in this area, or where they had come from somewhere else, what brought them there or what kept them there. Every single person answers were the same immediately, and it was the people. And when I hear that, it's like, you can live anywhere in the world. It's the people that really make life living in a particular area.
Nope, absolutely true. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you wanted to cover that you maybe didn't get a chance to talk about that you might have wanted to?
I think we covered up that there's really so much to talk about with genealogy. I could actually go on for days on it, which I'm not going to do. But I do have some of my episodes are going to be presented at a few places. I just did one over at East Burke Senior Center, where I was doing the Deep Family Secret Uncovered, the one about me discovering my father's first wife.
Okay.
And I'm going to actually be doing that again, and that one's going to be at the Catawba Council on Aging, the senior center there. I'm going to be having kind of a 4-week, I don't know if you want to call it a master class or just 4 different episodes that I'm going to be doing at the Catawba County Library in Newton. And that's going to be January 19th and the 26th. You can contact the library there. Also doing 2 episodes in February, February 2nd and February 8th. I'm going to be talking about how to become a tombstone tourist. That's one of my favorite things, is traipsing through cemeteries. You can find all kinds of fun stuff there. Doing obstacle or opportunity, finding the pathway to genealogy gems. And then also talking about the 1950 census that just came out. So this is going to be one of the first ones where some of the people are actually in it and can find themselves. And I don't think you're quite old enough yet, Mike, for that one there.
Yeah.
And then also doing 3 keys to successful research and keeping the momentum. And one of the things I wanted to say about my Family History Detective series, it's really kind of for everyone. Even if you're not into genealogy or doing your own research or anything like that, it's more of storytelling. And it's storytelling that takes you, these are all case studies of my own research. And it just takes the listener along on a journey with me, say, discovering that first wife of my father, discovering what happened behind the death of that Civil War soldier, and getting ideas and inspiration on how to honor these people, honor a Civil War soldier or American Revolutionary soldier, make those family connections. What are some of the fears that some people might have of reaching out to a stranger? And so a lot of people get inspiration by my stories on, like, okay, well, if that happened to her and she got these results, like finding the actual picture of a 3 times great grandmother. And yes, that picture came from a spouse of a 4th cousin once removed in California that I had never met.
Wow.
Had this picture of my 3 times great grandmother. So it's those kind of things that can make people realize, wow, okay, if that happened to her, it can happen to me as well. And there's so many of those things that have just truly changed my life. And that's what I want other people to have, that kind of same powerful and joyful impact as I've had.
That's awesome. That's so, it's just really cool. And it's not something that I even really thought about much, honestly, until I met you at the Leads group meeting. I'm like, this is really neat. And I think I thought it would be really good for other people to hear about it too. So,
well, I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity, Mike.
Definitely. It's been super interesting conversation, and I'm sure, listeners, I think, will definitely like this one. So,
Thank you.
Really appreciate being on the show, and hopefully, everybody, I make sure to what's the website again? Let's
Heritage with Heart.
heritagewithheart.com, right?
That's right.
All right. So go there and learn about Rhonda, and learn about maybe how you can, find a little bit of the story in your own past. Maybe she can help you find that. So thank you, Rhonda, so much for being on, and look forward to this episode airing. And it was great talking to you today.
Great talking to you too. Thank you.
Thank you.